Do you love books? Do you wish you could hear some insights straight from the author themselves? Join Sam Hankin, your host, as he interviews top-selling book authors and dives into interesting and unforgettable discussions here at the Avid Reader.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. Our guest today is Shannon Vallor, author of The AI Mirror: How to Reclaim Our Humanity in an Age of Machine Thinking. It was published earlier this year by Oxford University Press. Shannon is an American philosopher of technology. She's the Baillie Gifford Chair in the Ethics of Data and Artificial Intelligence at the Edinburgh Futures Institute. Her previous work was Technology and the Virtues, a philosophical guide to a future worth wanting. And then a lot of her scholarly work is really fascinating because it deals with social networking. Some of it's a while ago, so things have changed, but they're still very relevant to us. Social networking, human enhancement, technology, dignity, care bots, how we flourish on Facebook, which may be somewhat out of date, but is still important to a certain generation. Armed robots and military virtue, and character philosophy and technology. So in any event, I find that AI is obviously a fascinating topic. Not only is it ubiquitous, it's everywhere, but there seem to be three camps of followers of it: those who embrace it as the future and maybe salvation of mankind, those who approach it with some wariness, but look forward to its growth into an intellectual and empathetic observer and participant, and those who are scared to death of it. So Shannon covers a lot of ground with regard to all three core beliefs, but in my opinion, comes down on the side of fear. Could be wrong. So I'm of the first cohort that AI is our future, and as Elon Musk and Sam Altman predict, both of them as the forerunners of the technology, it's an essential element in the coming destruction of mankind, for better or worse. And they're the ones who are working on it. But in the interim, I feel it's the most valuable asset that our civilization has ever created. The question with regard to our discussion is AI really a mirror? And if so, is it any more of a mirror than my conversation today with Shannon? So welcome, Shannon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So
I'd like to start off by challenging, though, a couple of the sort of starting points, if that's all right.
That's perfect.
So, I mean, first of all, I think one of the important things to understand about Elon Musk and Sam Altman is that they're businessmen. They're not AI researchers. They're not actually experts working at the coalface of the technology. They're people who are building companies that want to profit off the technology. And if you talk to AI researchers about what AI is today and what it's likely to become, people who don't have an investment in marketing the sale of these technologies, you actually get a much different perspective. And I can recommend a number of books on this that might interest the audience. For example, Neil Lawrence, who's a computer science professor at the University of Cambridge, has written a book called The Atomic Human, which is a really wonderful look at AI from a kind of grounded scientific perspective, rather than from a marketing perspective, which is what we're hearing from Elon Musk and Sam Altman.
I interviewed him for that book.
Oh, good. Wonderful. The other thing I would say is AI is not one thing, but many. So the framing where we say, okay, what is your reaction to AI, or what are your feelings about AI? What do you have hope or fear about AI? That imagines that AI is one technology. AI is a family of different technologies which have very different risks, very different benefits, and very different prospects. So I try to remind audiences of that. So if we're talking about AI, what do we mean? Do we mean large language models? Do we mean narrow machine learning tools designed to solve particular kinds of problems? Do we mean the kind of AI that's still only a matter of science fiction, like AGI or ASI? So these are all very different things. And my approach to them is I would say neither fear nor hope for salvation, but rather a discriminating, grounded assessment of the different risks and benefits of each of these kinds of technologies.
I understand that. I would disagree with some of the things about whether these guys are really interested in money. Sam Altman, yet. I don't think Elon Musk has ever been interested in money, but we forget that. But you do say this book is, in the end, about humanity's loss of self-knowledge, and with it, the loss of confidence in our own moral capacity. That does.
But I also say that the call is coming from inside the house, and that the danger is actually not from AI itself.
Well, let's look at it this way then. I mean, the title, the epigraph to a certain extent, and, you know, just because I can, because of my iPad, I can realize that you've used the word mirror 434 times in your book. So to me, that's kind of like methinks thou protestest too much, because one, I don't look at it as a mirror, because I'm not looking at it as reflecting a distortion-free or distortion-laden version of myself. Just as when we're talking, we are mirroring each other. Our own viewpoint is being reflected, just as we're discussing with our contradictory positions. That's kind of mirroring. And I don't see much different between that and what we do with AI. I think before I go on blabbing, you can respond to that.
Well, I do think that there's a profound difference here. So when you go into your bathroom mirror and you look at your own reflection, you know there's not a second mind in there with you, right?
Well, my psychological state would disagree with you, but I don't think that's everybody. I always have an observer all my life.
Well, I mean, that's a part of your mind, right? I'm talking about a second independent mind that can go off and separate from yours. All right. When you step into your bathroom and you look at your reflection in the mirror, you know that there is one person in the room, one mind. Now, that mind may have many different dimensions. It may be rich with multiplicity and contradictions like all of us, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to distinguish between a reflection and the thing it's a reflection of. Now, the mirroring that you're describing is something else. That's actually, so in English, we use words in many different ways. When we talk about mirroring each other in conversation, we're describing a very different thing than the physical property of reflection. What we're talking about is the way that people mirror each other psychologically by adjusting their responses to the rhythms and the sort of emotional affect of other people. That's a sociological and psychological property of mirroring that means something fundamentally different than what mirroring means in the contexts of physical reflection. And what I'm arguing in the book is that AI tools are actually much closer to that physical kind of mirroring than they are to what you're describing as the social interaction that happens between two people, where there are two minds, two fully independent minds that will go away and separate and remain minds that are trying to find some interesting intersections between their understanding of the world. So in the book, I argue that when we talk to a large language model, that is not what's happening. What's happening instead is that we're interacting with something that produces echoes of human intelligence, reflections of human intelligence in linguistic form. And the only difference really is that it's patterns in data being reflected instead of optical patterns in light. And that the data represent an amalgamation of human intellect rather than a sort of singular example of it, as when you go into your mirror. When you go into your bathroom and look at the mirror, the only face being reflected is yours. When I talk to ChatGPT, the intellect that's being reflected back is an amalgamation of all of the human intelligence that went into the training data.
Well, one, when I look in a mirror, I see what I think I look like. When people look at me, they see what they think I look like, and there is what I look like. All three of those are different. When I talk to ChatGPT, as I have already this morning a number of times, I find that it is a social interaction for my purposes. And I find myself talking to someone who's smarter than anyone else I could talk to. I mean, whether it's an algorithm that you feel is flawed, or whether it's an algorithm that provides us valuable information, I would posit that a professor whose bailiwick is the Civil War won't know as much to teach his students as ChatGPT does. And in the interim, it's low bandwidth because he also may be talking about his own family or why Verizon didn't show up at his house yesterday. But in any event, he's going to bring his own prejudices and bias to his explanation of what the Civil War was about. I would prefer talking to ChatGPT. But that may be what you're warning of.
Presumably you're aware, if you've read the book, that first of all of the biases that are present in human intelligence are reflected in the outputs of these tools. So they are no more objective and neutral a perspective on any subject matter. In fact, they tend to amplify the biases that humans carry with them because those are strong patterns in the training data. Secondly, I think you've switched context here from talking about the question of whether there's another mind that you're speaking to whether you are able to extract information from that system. So being able to extract a great deal of information from a computational system is not the same thing as having a conversation with another mind. And when I talk about a social interaction, right, a social interaction is an interaction between two sentient creatures who have a social awareness of one another. That's not what's happening when you're talking to a large language model. What you're talking to when you're talking to a large language model is a mathematical matrix that is used to generate strings of text that match certain patterns in the training data. The human intelligence is reflected in the training data. But in the same way that the reflection of your face in the bathroom mirror is not a face, the reflection of intelligence that comes out of a large language model is not intelligent. Despite the fact that you can get information, and you're correct about this, you can get information from a far greater variety of sources and about a far greater variety of topics than you could get from any one human expert. So it's true that there is more information contained in a large language model about a broader range of topics than there is contained in any one individual human's mind. But that's about information retrieval. That is not actually about intelligence. And the reason that we know that these systems lack intelligence is because when you provide them with a problem that violates the expected pattern in the training data, they can't solve it. So there's a great website that exemplifies this. It was a blog post that was put out in April. And I will, just while I'm here, because I never remember the title of the blog post, but it's called a Man, a Boat, and a Goat, and a Chatbot. That's the it's from the mindmatters.ai website. I really encourage the viewers and listeners to look at this. It is an exemplification of how something that looks masterfully intelligent can't actually think its way out of a paper bag if you provide it with a problem, even a very simple problem, a problem that an 8-year-old child could actually solve just by using common sense knowledge of the world. These models, even the best models as of April of this year, would fail in ways that an 8-year-old child would not to reason about a simple problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'll just sort of quickly mention it. So the problem is a man and a goat are on one side of the river. They have a boat. How can they both go across? ChatGPT failed to solve it. Gemini failed to solve it. Microsoft Copilot failed to solve it. An 8-year-old could have answered the question correctly. Now, if you read more about it on the blog post, the answer is very clear why this happens. It's because it's actually trying to solve a more complicated version of the puzzle that appears many times in the training data. It's often sometimes called the missionary puzzle. It involves a man trying to cross a river with a carnivorous animal, an herbivore animal, and a vegetable. And the solution of the problem is quite complicated because the man can't leave all these objects together without one consuming the other. But when you simplify the problem into a version that involves no puzzle really, something an 8-year-old could solve, the systems respond with answers that are completely nonsensical, that repeatedly violate laws of common sense physics, that lose track of the series of actions that are being recommended. An intelligent creature that understood as much as a human understands would not make these kinds of mistakes. What these systems are doing is trying to predict and replicate patterns. And when you violate the pattern, the systems break down completely. There's no intellectual capability to reason through it.
Well, I would argue that it's still just a child, and it will not make that mistake once it's taught not to make that mistake.
It's not a child. It's not a child.
Well,
it's not a person.
It's getting better and better. So, well, yeah, it's not a mirror either. Those are words you have to use. And I mean, everything's going to be a metaphor in this conversation. You know, it's just like
but this isn't actually how humans reason, though. So it isn't the case that a human can solve the more complicated version of the problem by thinking and then fail to solve the simplest version of the problem. That's actually not how human minds work. Because common sense reasoning is this sort of foundational understanding of the world that constitutes our intelligence. And then the higher order pattern matching that we do, cognitively speaking, where we solve things like complex logic puzzles, are actually built upon that common sense understanding. These are systems that can do the complicated pattern matching, in some cases better than we can, but actually lack the common sense understanding underneath it.
I agree with that. But then again, I also find that as far as a human interacting with any of these, whether it's Gemini or Perplexity or ChatGPT, that you have to be intelligent enough to frame the query properly. So if I realize, but example, and then I won't go on too long, but one example is like, I asked it, you know, what is the gift that the boys give Doc in John Steinbeck's Cannery Row? And it told me something, and I said, no, that's not right. It was an automobile part. And then it said this kind of part. And I said, no, I don't think that was it either. And then it gave me the right answer. The same thing that would happen in a conversation with a human being. Once I gave it enough hints, what if I told it, no, that's not the right answer about the goats, but I have to know enough to frame the query. The masses perhaps do not have enough information, not their fault, to frame the query properly.
The masses can figure out how to get a goat across a river in a boat. That's what I'm trying to say, is that this sort of basic common sense reasoning, you don't need a university degree to be able to solve that puzzle. It's actually a very simple one. So again, there are complex areas of knowledge that we all lack, and it's very convenient to have an information retrieval system like a search engine, or a different kind of information generation system, which is what these are. They don't actually retrieve facts from the world like a search engine does, or data that's stored somewhere. They generate batches of text that match very closely the stored data that it has already seen. So it's a kind of information retrieval system that, instead of just giving you what you asked for, gives you a slightly different version of what you asked for. But that is a very different kind of thing than thinking. These tools don't think or reason or understand any more than a search engine does. But the patterns, because they're linguistic, because they are given in the currency of thought that we recognize, are easy to trick us into thinking that we are thinking with a machine, that we're talking with a thinking machine. Just in the same way that we can be tricked momentarily by seeing our reflection in a mirror and think that there's another person there, right? Until we realize, oh, actually, no, that's me. So
Well,
the problem is these systems, because they are an amalgamation of so much human data, they don't produce that sense of, oh, that's me. But in fact, that is. When you see the puzzle that I just mentioned, you can say, oh, I get it. That's us. It's just reflecting back to us that missionary puzzle that we have spoken about and reasoned through and put on logic tests so many times. It's just spitting that back at us, even though that's not actually what we asked for.
but look what happens to us every day. We're tricked by miscreants. We're tricked by bad people. We're tricked by people who want to take money from us. We're tricked by lots and lots of people. And what the problem I have, and I have read your book very closely, the problem I have is that, okay, what's wrong with this picture? I understand it's not a sentient human being. I understand the algorithms are flawed. I understand that there are biases, whereas certain elements of the population don't get enough care in hospitals because the algorithms tend to bias them towards the wrong way. I understand that. In fact, I asked ChatGPT if that was true, and she said yes. She goes, yeah, it's exactly right. This is what I do. It's a mistake. It shouldn't happen. So if you frame the query properly, if I say, do you do this? Does it hurt people? She said, yes, it does. Didn't say I'm sorry, but
so that's actually a property of these models known as sycophancy. So a sycophant is someone that tells you what you want to hear and takes cues from what you say to generate something that is expected. And these models actually have a serious problem with that. And again, this is an indication of a lack of intelligence, that you can actually get them to change their minds about anything. You can actually talk them into contradicting the claims they've already made in a conversation with you.
Then you're tricking them. You're just tricking them. That's all. You can trick them. Well, when ChatGPT says, "Oh, that's a fascinating question, Sam," I know what it's doing. I know that it's being sycophantic, so I just discard that part of the response. I know when it's telling me something nice about me to make me feel good.
But not because it wants you to feel good. You know that, right? It has no awareness of you as a being who has feelings that need to be comforted, right? These are linguistic patterns of replication and mirroring. These are not emotional responses from the machine to your needs.
It's just like the movie Her. I understand that, but I guess what I'm saying.
Actually, no. I want to pause there, because actually, this is something that I think happens a lot. Is that our expectations of what these systems are colored by our experiences with what AI is in fiction, and actually in Her, the assumption is that the AI in that context is sentient, that it has a mind that carries on independently, that thinks thoughts even when no one is interacting with it, and that has needs that go beyond the applications that the humans are using. And in fact, that's how the movie ends, right? Not to give too many spoilers. But this is a sentient mind in Her. At least we're led to believe this. That is one of the premises of the plot. So again, I think what happens, and I call this in the book the Narcissus illusion, right? We're tricked by the lifelike nature of these systems, but we're also conditioned by our history of science fiction and the ambitions of the AI research program itself, that for 70 years have been trying to create a thinking thing out of silicon. We're conditioned to expect that to be the result of AI, a sentient thing that goes off and has feelings, that goes off and thinks thoughts of its own. But there's no capability within these kinds of systems for that kind of activity.
Well, without context, there's no way I know whether you're a sentient human being, and you don't know whether I am either.
Well, that's the thing that I also talk about in the book, is that the sort of strategy that is often used actually to kind of defend our intuitions about these machines. When they, for example, fail to match our description of sentience or consciousness, we start reducing our descriptions of what we are. We start talking about ourselves as if we are just word-generating machines, as if we are dark inside, as if we only show emotion on our faces and don't actually experience it on the inside, as if we don't understand the words we say, right? And this is the powerful message of the book that I'm trying to put forward, is that is actually the danger that AI poses. And it's a danger that doesn't come from the technology itself directly. It comes from the way we interact with it and the way that certain powerful narratives are exploiting the genuinely useful capabilities of AI technology to undermine our confidence in human agency and in the legitimacy of human decision making. Because if you begin to think that you yourself are no different from these machines, then you lose any moral claim, any intellectual claim to be a decision maker, to be someone who is not replaced by these tools, to be someone who is seen as more valuable and more worthy of protection than an AI system, which is merely code and data. So the rhetorical strategy, when we realize, oh, we can't actually describe these things as conscious or sentient, or having meaningful experiences, or having genuine awareness of one another, genuine social interaction, genuine conversation or meetings of minds. The strategy is to pull back then on the human side and say, you know what? You're not real to me. You're not really a mind to me. I'm just guessing that you're a mind. I don't actually know. And I'm going to reject that. I actually do know that you're a mind, as much as I know anything.
Yeah, but
nothing, of course, is 100% certain.
It could be a solipsistic universe. You can't disprove that.
I can't disprove that. But once you raise the criterion there, then you admit that you know nothing. And actually, I'm not that sort of philosopher, right? We do know things.
Well, let me give you a real world example, and it's pertinent to me because I interviewed David Chalmers about Reality Plus.
Mm-hmm.
And you totally disagree with his, which I do too, because as I told him, we have to eat, we have to eliminate waste. You can't just sit there and be in a different reality because it just won't work. But he believes what he believes. You believe what you believe. And me as the third person, how am I supposed to decide which of you is right with regard to that point?
Evidence.
His is an opinion. Well, okay, I'll give you a perfect example in the book. A real world example. You talk about STEM schools and how
about what?
STEM, about science, technology, engineering.
Yes. Okay. Sure.
And you talk about how you feel that they have led us to a situation in which they're depriving the students who graduate from STEM schools of something very important. So my stepdaughter goes to STEM. Today, her assignment is, to recite a soliloquy from Hamlet. So I'm thinking, no, I disagree with you. I'm allowed to do.
I'm not sure how a single data point disproves a broad observation about the fact that narrow STEM education that actually doesn't provide exposure to the arts, humanities, and social sciences is depriving students of the ability to exercise the power they have responsibly and legitimately, because there's a certain amount of civic awareness and sort of political and social understanding that one needs in order to use power in a socially trustworthy and legitimate way. And I'm arguing that the sort of education that deprives us of that, therefore deprives people of the capabilities to actually take charge of the justice system, for example, Now, a single data point that you have a student who is fortunate enough to go to a school where the arts and humanities are not neglected, I don't see how that actually relates to the claim that I'm making.
Yeah,
which
you're
is that if
making a claim. You've given me no data points. You've simply expressed an opinion. Your claim, as
sure,
is a claim. You could be wrong. You could be 100% wrong.
Yes, I could, but
Right.
I want to come back to this point here, which is that when we make claims, it is not simply a matter of I believe X and you believe Y. External parties who maybe don't have an opinion can gather evidence to evaluate the plausibility of different claims. So let's say we're in a conversation where I say vaccines save far more lives than they will ever conceivably injure, and that in the 20th century, the vaccine is the most valuable technology ever invented. That the vaccine, for example, is as close to an ideal technology as one could find from the standpoint of relieving human suffering. Now, you might, or someone else I'm talking to might say, no, actually, that's all a lie. Vaccines don't save lives. Vaccines are actually poisons. They give you autism. They corrupt your genes. And the more vaccines that we spread into society, the less human we will become. Now, two opinions put side by side. It's clear how we adjudicate that. We look at the available evidence that we have, and the available evidence comes down clearly more on one side than another. We can say the same thing about, claims about what's happening with climate change, how old the earth is, right? We can do the same thing when we make claims about AI. It is not like art where we merely have a subjective appreciation of things, and where the painting that moves me doesn't move you, and there's no right answer here, right? If a Van Gogh makes me weep and leaves you cold, it doesn't mean necessarily that one of us is wrong. As long as you have an aesthetic sensibility that allows you to appreciate other works of art and be moved by other works of art, then there's no meaningful value difference between our judgments. But that is not true if we're making claims about vaccines. It's not true if we're making claims about climate change. It's not true if we're making claims about what the law does or doesn't say. It's not true if we're making claims about how old the universe is or how old the earth is. And any claim that we make in those areas is, in theory, fallible.
Well,
but the amount of evidence that we have for one proposition over another is not the same. And the same is true when we make claims about AI. So could I be wrong about any given claim that I make about AI in the book or anywhere else? Absolutely. Just as I could be wrong about how old the earth is. But if you want to talk about how we decide whether, for example, an AI system is sentient or not, we go look for evidence. And there is evidence, actually. There is evidence of what sentience requires in every single example of sentience that we've ever been able to encounter. And we do not have an equivalent structure evident in machines. Could sentience somehow magically appear in a machine without the supporting biological structures that enable sentience in animals? In theory, it's possible. Anything is possible. But there's no evidence to lead us to that conclusion.
Well, back 30 years ago, Alan Turing's test, when you talk to Eliza, after 20 minutes, you didn't know, well, you did, but you didn't know whether she was a human or not. That was like, oh, she's sentient. We know it's not true. But given what okay, so yes, flat earthers, people who believe we didn't land on the moon, people who believe what you're saying about vaccines. We now have Secretary of Health and Human Services who probably will, all these things we couldn't believe have happened, and you can't say it anymore. You couldn't make this stuff up. It's way beyond that now. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could say no more vaccines in school. Then we all die. Polio, mumps, chickenpox, measles, we all get them. I mean, that can happen.
Yes.
So that's where go ahead.
And I don't think we should live in a world where policies are not based on evidence.
We shouldn't.
And I don't think we should believe things about AI that aren't based on evidence either.
But we do. And what I'm not trying to go way off. What I'm trying to say is your opinions about what may happen because of these, for want of a better word, flaws in AI will actually affect us in the short and long term with regard to us as the human race and who and what we are and think we are. What I'm saying is, with regard to politics in the world today, whether it's the Sudan or Israel or Ukraine or the United States, these are things that really are going to happen. I'm not going to say may happen. I think they are going to happen because we have missed it for the past 10 years. We have just ignored it, and now we seem to be resigned to it. So I guess the question to you would be, what do you think the consequences of what you posit in your book will mean for the human race in the short and long term, unless these things are ameliorated?
Well, that's a really good question. And one of the main claims...
Is it the first good question I've asked?
No. But I think it is a really good question, because one of the main things that I point out in the book is that we need to reject the kind of framings that suggest that the future is in a sense already determined, whether we believe it's determined by the currently most powerful economic forces, whether we believe it's determined by the shape of our new technologies. This kind of determinism is one of the most dangerous weapons of authoritarians, because authoritarians want you to believe that the future is already decided and that you have no path to change it. Now, we're hearing a lot of determinism about AI. So we're often being told, and again, this comes out of these kinds of marketing rhetoric about AI that basically says, AI is here, you just have to adapt. I just recently listened to a speech by Eric Schmidt, who is ex-Google CEO, who was in the middle of talking about how we should just give up on our climate targets and essentially allow them to be wiped out by our use of AI to meet kind of infinite economic demand for this power, despite its immense environmental cost. And in the middle of that speech, he said, and because it's the arrival of an alien intelligence, and it was such a remarkable moment here, he says, because it's the arrival of an alien intelligence, something we don't understand, we're going to make mistakes, yada, yada. First of all, nothing arrived, it was built. Secondly, these aren't aliens. These are man-made technologies. It's no more alien than your microwave. Third, right, the idea that the technology arrived independently of human choices and decisions, and that it will develop in ways that are not steered and governed by human decisions, right? We don't understand it. We don't understand it means we can't govern it. And that's what tech companies want you to believe, that you can't govern these technologies. So everything that you're describing is part of this really wider cultural moment where we're constantly being told that we should just surrender to the status quo because there's no way of changing the direction of travel.
May very well be true.
Right. It's the idea that the status quo is the future. Every authoritarian that has ever lived has used that strategy. And do you know what takes authoritarians down? Is people who refuse to believe it. And in many cases in history where we had societies that internally believed that they would be forced to live in that particular configuration for the rest of their lives. And then one day the world changed. And it changed because people who didn't believe that story changed it. So this is a long way of answering your question. You're asking me, what is going to happen in the future? And what are going to be the consequences of us surrendering our agency and power to these commercial purveyors of AI systems? And I'm saying I don't accept the premise that we will surrender that power. What I'm doing in my book is making a call to action to make people recognize that that future is not set in stone, that that future has not been written, and that we still have the power to turn the wheel. But the rhetoric around AI is very much this sort of rhetoric. It says, you paltry human are already outmatched by these technologies. So who are you to try to steer? Who are you to try to determine what sort of policies, what sort of laws, what sort of decisions should be made? No, AI is driving the bus. You go sit in the back. And then hopefully it will take you somewhere nice, as opposed to taking you over a cliff. But regardless, you can't control the road. You can't control the trip. You have to just sit and wait and see what happens. That to me is the danger. And again, that's not a danger from technology. That's a danger from a certain sort of politically motivated narrative that tells people that they have no power. And the person who most needs that rhetoric is the authoritarian, because they never have that kind of control. And the only way they keep control is by making you believe that you can't grab the wheel.
Well, your mentioning of Schmidt helps me because I can approach this from a different angle because of the way his interpretation affected you and your opinions. So when light bulbs appeared, candle makers said, oh, they're too dangerous. Or when Edison was doing DC and Tesla was doing AC, and Edison said, AC is going to kill you. Wrong. Or the automobile was feared. And look, the automobile it's great, except it's destroying the environment as well. So I think it's so funny because in my bookstore, I sell candles. Candles are our best-selling product. But why do we need candles? Not that this is apropos of anything. I just find it a phenomenon. But in any event, that would be the perfect example. Candle makers were scared of the light bulb, and they try to convince you that light bulbs are going to hurt you. But in effect, they made life wonderful for a lot of people. Maybe that's what is going to happen. I mean,
first of all, don't remember what I said about AI not being one thing, right? So the light bulb and the AI are not equivalent in the sense that the light bulb is not a general purpose technology in the way that AI is developing to be not only a general purpose technology, but many different technologies that can be developed in different ways for different purposes.
But they're both tools. They're both tools.
Of course. And what I'm trying to say is there are forms and applications of AI that I believe are too harmful to be justifiable. And there are plenty of forms and applications of AI that I think we should run full speed ahead with. And I'm very clear about that in the book. So this idea that I'm saying fear the light bulb, fear the AI, that's actually entirely contrary to the message of my book. The message of my book is don't fear AI. The message of my book is don't give up your agency and freedom and right to choose what kind of AI you have and what it gets used for.
Yeah, but going back to, you actually say this book is, in the end, about the loss of our knowledge of ourselves, and the loss of our confidence and our moral capacity. You say that's what the book is about in the end. That kind
It
of
is.
pretty
And
much.
AI didn't do that to us.
No, I agree.
AI is just an instrument that is amplifying a narrative and a kind of rhetoric that has been pushing us to that conclusion for a very long time.
But more than half of Americans believe that vaccines do cause autism. Nothing. I don't know what I can do about that. I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know how that is. I mean, that was relevant. I brought that up to the point that we can use evidence to make decisions.
Yeah, but what I'm bringing it up for is what you're saying is it's not AI, and what I'm saying is, and you were saying how Schmidt's saying just give into it. Like Musk says, the cure to climate change is just use up all the fossil fuels, use them up as fast as possible, because then we have to rely on alternative sources of energy. That's his position. And I guess what I'm saying is, you're telling me that I'm not grasping what you've attempted to elucidate in the book. And I don't know what I'm not grasping.
Well, the light bulb story I took to be you suggesting that I was like the people saying fear the light bulb.
No, I was just saying that's what Schmidt was.
Or that I was like the candle makers. And
no, it was like what Schmidt was saying. Yeah, the candle maker. He was saying basically candle makers should give up and just give into the light bulb, and he would be right. It's true. Candles.
What he's saying is we shouldn't actually continue to make any effort to meet our climate targets. That's literally what he said. He said we're not going to make our climate targets. So I would rather than again, you just told me that the future is determined, that we are not going to meet our climate targets. That is
because I have evidence. And by 2030, are we going to meet them? No, we're not going to come anywhere in meeting them. We're going the opposite way.
By the way, I think you're right in that is in fact the evidence. But there is a difference between saying if we continue the way we are now, we are not going to meet our climate targets, and saying we are not going to meet our climate targets. Do you understand the difference there? Right.
I understand.
The point is,
I understand saying
the goal of saying that we are not going to meet our climate targets anyway. The goal is to say we are going to continue on this path that does not, in fact, attempt conservation, that does not, in fact, attempt to use AI selectively and wisely, because this is actually where the battle is, right? So people like myself think we ought to be looking at the environmental impact of particular kinds of AI models. Remember what I've said many times, that they're not all the same. And we should be minimizing the use of the most carbon intensive training and application of AI. We should be minimizing and reducing the use of those most impactful models on our climate targets. We should be reducing those and using them only when the benefits are clearly outweighing the costs. For example, for applications where no smaller model will do the job, and where the effect is life-saving or somehow of a value that is justified by, or that justifies this expenditure. And for other applications where the benefit is merely entertainment, or where the benefit does not, in fact, provide a vital service that cannot also be provided by people, that in those cases, we should be making actually decisions to use smaller, more efficient models, or in some cases, not use AI at all where it's not needed. So this is one strategy, is where you say, there's different kinds of AI. They have very different benefits and risks, very different costs, both economic and environmental. And we should be tailoring the use of AI to our needs. Schmidt's story is the demand for these things is infinite and we should meet that demand, period.
Well, I agree with all 6 of your shoulds. I also feel that there's a 0% chance that any of those shoulds will be accomplished.
Well,
I'm 100% sure.
That's where you and I differ, is I still believe in human decision making.
How is that going to happen? How would that happen?
How did we fix the ozone layer?
Well, I think it's pretty much chance. I don't think we did any. I don't think me not using spray deodorant.
Seriously.
Yeah.
You don't think us banning CFCs?
No, I don't think.
You think it healed itself?
I think one jet plane ride for Taylor Swift to go to an Eras concert would obviate every single person recycling.
No. I'm talking about the ozone layer.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about carbon. Go back. No, just go back to my question. How did the ozone layer get closed?
Well, you'll say one thing and I'll say the other. To me, it just happened to happen, and scientists grasped that. And, you can think I sound like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now, or a flat earther, but I don't think anything we did. No, I don't think anything we did closed that hole. I honestly don't believe that, because I don't think we could have. This comes back
to evidence. There's a mountain of evidence that, in fact, yes.
I disagree that there's a mountain of evidence. Okay. What I've read is that, hey, look at that. The ozone hole is closed up. How did that happen? But I don't know. I actually, the answer is I don't know. The answer is I don't know.
Okay.
I don't say I know, because that's wrong. I shouldn't say I know. I believe something, but you're correct. Empirically, I have no idea if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
I have an opinion and you have one.
So I will say I am extremely confident that human decision-making in the interests of the long-term health of the human family played an essential role in the closing of the hole in the ozone layer.
Okay, so we agree to disagree.
So yes, so this is the difference between you and me, is that I believe human decision-making matters. Historically has, many times, and historically can today. There is nothing that has happened objectively that has stripped us of our agency. We retain every bit of ability to make good decisions that we had 100 years ago.
We have the ability. Whether we'll utilize that ability, whether we'll utilize that agency, I mean, I'm sure some Jews...
And we won't utilize it if we believe there's 0% chance of that happening, which is what you've said.
No,
this is my point, is that this sort of fatalism, this sort of there's 0% chance of us making good decisions. That is what sends you to the back of the bus to just wait for your fate.
I'm not a fatalist. I just think I'm a pragmatist, and you say, no, I'm a nitwit.
No, a pragmatist doesn't say 0% chance of making good decisions. That's fatalism.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. A pragmatist says there is a chance of making good decisions, but it's going to be very difficult. And here's how we increase the chances of it happening.
Well, how has what happened in the United States happened then? Do you think this is
because we made bad decisions? The fact that we can make good decisions doesn't mean that we always do. And I actually think one of the explanations, one of the many, there's not one single explanation, it's a complex phenomenon. But one of the contributors to the situation that we see in the United States is a decline in confidence in human decision-making and the power of our political agency. The loss of trust in institutional systems and the degradation of social trust more broadly in America is a huge contributor. And it's why you don't see that same degree of decision-making failure in countries where there is high social trust.
Yeah, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, they're always the 5 countries.
There's others, sure. Yeah,
but they're always the 5. So yeah, but like in 1933, I think sometimes intelligence, artificial or not, works against you. In 1933, Jews thought, oh, Hitler's a buffoon, just like somebody else was a buffoon. First you ignore him, then you laugh at him, and then you fight him, and then you lose. And that's what happened in 1933 to 1945. But human agency, as you said, luckily, barely, was able to prevail. And and you say I'm a fatalist. I guess, if you I don't believe I'm a fatalist. If you think I'm one, that's fine. And if I'm...
Well, 0% chance of doing anything different sounds to me like fatalism.
You're hopeful. I'm not hopeful.
No. Are you serious? I mean,
Yeah.
if I said the chances are 5% that we might actually pull ourselves out of a climate apocalypse, would you say that's hopeful?
Well, if it wasn't for the fact that we were past the point of no return, I would consider that possibility. But if you asked me 10 years ago, if you asked me in 2014, is this what America will look like today? I would have said there's a 0% chance that that would happen.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that you don't have to be, I don't actually think hopefulness is a particularly helpful attitude at the moment. If hopefulness means, I'm sure things will turn out well. I am most certainly not sure that things will turn out well. And in fact, if you wanted me to estimate the probabilities, I'd probably come down on the side of most things turning out quite poorly over the next half century at least, right? But things were certainly, as you pointed out, at a certain point in the Second World War, such that no reasonable person would have had more than a shred of hope of that calamity being stopped. The point being that there's a very different meaning to saying there's 0 chance that we will fix this, and saying there's a 5% chance that we will fix this. If there's a 5% chance that the human family comes through this on the other side, damaged, bruised, but able to rebuild, I will take that 5%.
So would I. The interior problem with that is that I know, and this is totally mine and I own it, I know that I'm not going to do anything to help it. I know I'm not going to get a placard and go protest in front of the White House. Which
you have human agency and freedom. You are absolutely able to not do those things.
Right. And my bookstore, I'm 72 years old. I have 5 grandchildren and 4 children. If some militant in uniform comes to my door and says, you can no longer sell these books, I'll say, okay, fine. Yeah. I'm not going to fight that.
Okay.
I don't want to, I can't. And if I did, it wouldn't make any difference anyway. So yeah, if that makes me a fatalist, but no, that would be my agency, as you said. I would be exerting.
Yeah, that's the thing about fatalism, is that it's still our choice even when we give up.
I still don't think I'm a fatalist.
Okay.
Because you tell me I'm a fatalist.
We can agree to disagree.
Yeah, but if you're telling me I'm a fatalist, and I'm telling you you're wrong. I mean, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's but the difference is this is civil discourse.
Yeah. I would like that 0% that you quoted me to go up to 1%, and then I'll say you're not a fatalist.
And how are you going to go about going from 0 to 1%? Your book.
My book, my teaching, which has a tiny little impact, but it's not nothing. And there are millions of people all over the world doing their part to have a tiny little impact that's not nothing. And that's the only way anything has ever gotten done in this world.
Hey, I just realized I am doing it because I'm talking to you.
There you go.
I feel much better now. That's a good way to end our conversation.
I think that is a perfect place to wrap it up. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
And your book was excellent. It's on the front table at our bookstore. And I think
wonderful to hear it.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the support.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Avid Reader. If you liked today's episode, check out more of our content on our channel.